Alright, so we're going to jump right in. So I've already sent my design over from the Canvas workspace online. It's already mirrored. I do that beforehand. I pulled up the measurements for you guys. So it's 11.25 across, 4.36 high. So I measure off my vinyl. So as you can see, I've cut it down. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And click OK again. And I'm going to scan in my vinyl. So the first thing you have to do is load your mat. This is very important that you load it properly. You want to make sure you don't load it quickly or anything like that. And then when you go back to like the base screen, this option right here is to scan your material. So I'm going to click start. And so as it starts, it's going to scan it in. So make sure the back of your machine is clear. And then because it's going to go all the way out the back and all the way through the front. And it's going to load in exactly the shape of your material so that you can go ahead and place your item properly. So as you can see, my item needs to actually be moved down a little bit. If you have trouble determining how your item is looking, you want to hit edit. You can actually zoom in so that you'll see, like, make sure all of your letters are in the right space. And then here you can use these top arrows right here to move your item like a little bit at a time. I just want to move my A over a little bit so it's not so close to the edge. I like for the entire red box to be inside of my material. That's just a sure way to make sure that your design is not going to go off of the paper or anything like that. And then I'm going to move it a little bit closer to the top because I'm probably going to try and salvage a little bit of this vinyl. So once you've got it exactly how you want, you just click OK. OK again. And then you want to select what you're doing. I'm doing a cut, and half cut is on. And then I have my pressure set at auto and my speed set at 4. It defaults to speed 5. I changed my speed lower just because I feel like sometimes when it cuts so fast, it misses some of the details. But how you manipulate what you want to do is here. So like I have found that, so cut this stuff up here, cut pressure, cut speed, most of this stuff does not apply for a half cut. The only thing up here that applies to your cut is this cut speed, the very first row. When you scroll all the way down, this is where the half cut stuff is. So half cut is on and cut pressure for the half cut is set to auto. This is where you change your cut pressure. I found for holographic vinyl, I have to change the pressure manually just because it does not cut all the way through the holographic material for whatever reason. It cuts a little too shallow, which makes it really hard to weed. So for your thicker materials, I would definitely suggest you always do a test cut just to make sure when you're weeding it, it comes out really easily. As you can see, this is going to cut really, really fast. It's only going to take 2 minutes to cut. As I've been talking, it's been cutting. It's not that loud. My fiance is asleep. He doesn't hear me down here crafting. He might hear me down here talking, but he does not hear my machine, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, so for like thicker materials, you have to be a little bit more careful because sometimes I found the only one I've ever had an issue with though was the holographic material. All of the other materials tend to cut fine on auto cut pressure. But for that holographic material, I would definitely suggest taking a look at the settings on the like whoever vinyl you're using on their website to see what they suggest, because I have found that no matter what brand, Cricut, Sizer, those are the two I've tried so far, it does not cut all the way through on auto mode. I don't know why, but you can manually override the auto settings, which I think is pretty cool. So it looks like we're finishing up. My spatula is trying to get in the way. Our cut, it's cutting out the little heart now, and I think it's all done. So I'm going to switch over to my other crafting area so we can do a little bit of weeding. You can get a material unveil. It's such a pretty color. Yeah, so I'm going to switch over. So I'll be right back. I'm actually using this Sizer electric vinyl, and I think this one is in the color cherry. So the first thing I do, is I take a pair of scissors and I see if there's any vinyl I can salvage. Sometimes these scrap pieces come really in handy for when you want to do like just like a little something, like if I want to cut out a heart or something small. So for this part, it's very important, if you're going to do this, to know what your design is and to pay attention to what those cut lines are. And I'm not going to try and salvage too much, but I like to try and save a little bit from every design. And this is just personal preference. It is up to you whether you try and salvage any pieces. I just find that I like having the little small scrap pieces for other things. I'm not going to try cutting across the bottom. I'm going to leave that for just waste. So basically, whatever you peel off of this sheet is wasted. You can't reuse it or anything like that. I know my sister, when we first started doing this t-shirt thing, she said, well, can't we just save it? And I said, no. Once you peel it off this backing, you can't save it. So the way I like to do it, I actually should have cut a little piece off of here. Look at all this extra vinyl. The way I like to do it is I like to kind of create a small tear from the edge to the of the paper, just so it makes it easier to kind of start lifting. You can use your weeder to weed everything, but I just find that this is easiest for me to weed this way by creating a small tear so I'll be able to lift. Sometimes you have to be careful because it will try and take pieces with it, so you have to kind of peel slowly. Just because when you're pulling it, you are creating a lot of tension. So you just want to be careful that you aren't pulling up anything that's supposed to be down. So like here, right here, is trying to pull that up. I'm going to take and hold it down. And so for this, like for something like this, when this happens, sometimes you can fix this yourself by adjusting your cut pressure and speed so it doesn't do this. But sometimes it's just unavoidable, is what I have found. Like you can play around with it, but sometimes it's just literally the tension you're creating that's causing like the letters to try and lift up. You'll kind of know the difference though when you have pieces sticking, like you have to literally rip them yourself. That's how you'll know that your machine isn't set correctly and it's not cutting all of the pieces, when you have to literally rip and like use like an X-Acto knife or something to cut pieces. That's how you'll know that it's definitely a machine setting. So sometimes this is such pretty vinyl. Sometimes when it gets to be a lot like this hanging off, it makes it harder for me to see. So I just take my scissors for the pieces that are sticking up and cut off some of the extra just to get rid of this, because this gets in the way for me personally. It makes it harder to see what you are doing. So I just like to have less vinyl is better for me. So I could just make sure I'm not weeding something that I shouldn't be weeding. I kind of try and peel along the cuts of the letters. I find that works best for making sure your design is not messed up. Because sometimes when you try and lift the whole thing, like I said, it lifts the entire design. Another trick I do sometimes is I go with my weeding tool and kind of lift at the edges so you hear that little ripping sound. Well, hopefully you hear it over my talking. That makes it much easier to peel it out. You just use your tool to kind of trace those edges. So you would use this, I'm going to do it one more time for you guys. You would use this and kind of trace along the edges just to kind of pop them out. And it makes it so much easier to weed. these are like some of my little tricks that I do when I am working on my design. Most importantly, you gotta weed out the letters. One great trick, another trick I do, so if I have like a lot of, if it's smaller, with the design that's big, it's pretty easy to tell what's weeding and what's not. But when it's a smaller design, sometimes you miss stuff. I flip it over and look at it. I look at my design to see how it looks and see if it makes sense. So like I would flip it over and say, okay, I missed that A. I mean, I know I have to weed this A because it's pretty obvious, but there you have it. So Barbiana, isn't this adorable? So now I'm going to start preheating my machine. All right, so I use the Cricut EasyPress 2. So we use the Cricut EasyPress 2, and I've turned my machine on. I've already set the temperature. You want to use the interactive guide to check to see what your settings should be. So I picked my material. I consider this, I guess, metallic. I don't know. I consider it metallic. It almost reminds me of a foil, but not quite, as more metallic-y. So I consider it a metallic, and then I picked my material and what I'm pressing on. Now the trick to this is when you're using a different brand, because this is all based off of basically Cricut vinyl, you want to also check your actual vinyl settings. So EasyWeed has pretty simple setup. You go there, you select what you're picking. You could oh, excuse me. You can see the cutter settings, the application settings. So I'm checking out the application settings. So it says to do 305 degrees, and Cricut said 315 degrees. Now the pressure, the time for pressing will be different because they're basing it off of, you know, a standard machine. I always follow Cricut's kind of operating press time. But what I will do, so they said I should do 305 degrees. So I'm going to change my degree between, in the middle of the two. So Cricut said 315, and then Sizer said 305. So I'm going to set my machine to 310. I'm going to leave the time. Sizer said press it for 10 to 15 seconds. But that is more so with if you're using a traditional heat press. I'm using the Cricut press, so I'm going to follow the instructions for Cricut, which is to press it the 30 seconds, then flip it and press it the 15 seconds on the back. So I'm going to let this heat up. You know it's not heated up because this is red. It'll beep and it'll turn green, and it will beep once it's heated up. It literally only takes at the most 2 to 3 minutes to heat up, but I'll be back once it heats up, which should be any minute now. All right, so I'm back. So I put my machine my machine has beep, so I put my shirt on top of my Cricut EasyPress mat. That's what you see underneath it. And the trick for lining up your design, the tag is always at the center of your shirt, so I always set my tag so I can see it, and I kind of line it up visually. I do make shirts to sell, so what I do is I always do a practice shirt. So this is a new design, and I'm just doing a regular practice shirt. I'm going to make this Barbiana t-shirt in this exact same color EasyWeed, but instead of a polyester shirt, I'm going to put it on a cotton poly blend. I always use polyester at home because I make a lot of my test shirts I use to work out in, so polyester is a little better when you're sweating at the gym. So before I do anything, I always line up my design and get an idea of how I want it to look. I put about 3 fingers between the top of my design and the collar of the shirt, and then that's how I kind of measure it. So I'm going to peel off my vinyl. So with the Cricut EasyPress, you do a pre-press. So you do that pre-press to make sure to get all the moisture out of your shirt. It heats up your material, which makes it a little bit easier to get your vinyl to lay. It also knocks out all of the wrinkles. So now I'm going to place my design again. We're going to make sure it's centered, and we're going to make sure it's smooth and that there are no wrinkles under my design. Whatever is pressed under this design is how it will be. So if you press your design on top of a wrinkle, your design will be flat across the wrinkle, and when you straighten it out, it will rip. If you press your design on top of hair, that hair will be trapped under your design. So because it's polyester, you want to use a protective sheet. I do find that using a protective sheet is almost the best practice though in general. So I'm going to take my press, And I'm going to do it in two. So my press could cover both sides of this design, but I just want to be sure that it is adhering all the way across evenly. It only requires medium pressure, but I want to be sure, so I'm going to press it in two separate pieces. Medium pressure is just putting your hand down and using a little bit of pressure. It does count down for you. We have 7 seconds left on this side. Then if you can see this A here sticking out, we're going to press that side separately. And so now we're going to do it again. But yes, so you want to be careful when you're pressing your design. You want to make sure your material is exactly how you want it to be, how you want it to look, because however you press it is how it will be. Once it is adhered down to this material, that is it. There will be no trying to lift it to remove something. No. So you always want to be really careful about that. So I'm going to finish out pressing it, flip it, and press it on the back. And then I'll come back for that peel for you guys. Alright, so I've already pressed both sides. A lot of sizer vinyls are hot or cold peel. This is a hot or cold peel, so I'm going to go ahead and start peeling it off. And that looks amazing.